Welcome to another instant reaction, and it is not the shock of Colorado beating TCU, but we did get to watch some fireworks. Jesse Simonton, Michael Penix Jr. just diced up Boise State. I mean, this is a pretty good Boise State defense, and Michael Penix Jr. just went off.
Loving my QB draft pick. Loving my QB draft pick.
I don't want to talk about it.
Yeah. I think we both screwed up, obviously, not taking Shedeur Sanders in hindsight.
Yes.
That doesn't look great. But while Travis Sanders, put together his Heisman reel in the early window, I think both of our guys, Michael Penix, Bo Nix had a great showing, for the Oregon Ducks there. I mean, the Pac-12s, man, they got some dudes that can just straight sling it.
Yeah, and now we add Shedeur Sanders to that mix. And, Michael Penix Jr. led the nation in passing yardage last year. I got a feeling we're going to see him probably up there again this year. The question is he going to get himself to New York? And I would think you have games like this over and over and over again, and you will. But this is going to be a league where, a lot of guys are going to put up big numbers. Now, Bo Nix put up huge numbers against a very overmatched opponent. What makes Penix so impressive is I think we're probably going to find out that Boise State's defense is not bad, and he made them look really bad.
Well, and I would just say as a team, I think this is a kind of a statement for Washington. Yeah. Because, you end that year with a lot of momentum. Obviously, there's a lot of budding optimism coming into this season. And for you to come out and beat what I agree. I mean, I think Boise easily, the way they finished the year under Andy Avalos last season, I think they're one of the favorites to get to the New Year's Six from the G5. And so to just, straight splattering them in the opener is a heck of a statement.
Rome Odunze, 7 catches for 132 yards. Jalen Polk, 3 catches for 101. Jalen McMillan, 8 for 95. Odunze had a TD. Polk had a TD. McMillan had 2 TDs. I mean, they're not short on targets. I mean, even after Dylan Morris came in, they're still scoring.
Well, what's also impressive, and this is, getting into the weeds for some folks because they see this score and they're just like, oh, overmatched opponent. Washington, they got the top 10 number next to their name, Boise State. Washington lost their starting running back late in fall camp.
Yeah.
And for their offense to look like they missed nothing. Now, obviously, Penix is the trigger man. He's the engine that makes this thing go. But that's still not nothing. The kid rushed for, double-digit touchdowns and 800 yards last season. So for them to not miss a beat there, Kalen DeBoer in openers remains money. It's just a cash cow. This was a reason Washington minus 14 was on my best bets. We each did best bets picks for On 3 this week. That Washington minus 14 in this game was one of my best bets, and it was no sweat.
And I think you also saw why Ryan Grubb was so sought after this offseason, why Alabama was interviewing for its OC position, and why everybody else wanted to talk to him too. This thing is tough to defend.
Well, it's just, I mean, the way they spread you out, but they play with a little bit of tempo, but just the precision. I mean, it's Penix's precision, and it's just he's going to slice and dice you. And I mean, in the Pac-12, you may have to score 40 to win a lot of these games. Did you see what Cal did? You talk about fireworks. Even Cal has 58 in the fourth quarter against
North
a
Texas
solid
in that game. Yeah,
I was going to say against a solid North Texas team. They got a first-year head coach, but that's still a solid team. I mean, don't sleep on Spavital and what he's doing. Back in Berkeley.
So Daniel Jones asks, is the Pac-12 that good, or is their schedule that favorable? Pac 8-0 start with 4 teams left to play. Well, Arizona, Southern Utah, and Oregon, Portland State. Yeah, that's favorable. But TCU's a tough opener for Colorado. Boise State's a tough opener for Washington. Yet this is the best Pac-12 we've seen in a long time. And it's the last Pac-12 we're ever going to see.
It's just a shame that no one wants to watch these teams, Andy, and they had to break up the league and couldn't get a TV partner and could only find eyeballs for these teams if they were in other conferences. It's just a shame.
It is amazing because, you're shipping this off to the Big Ten, what we just saw. Now, obviously, Penix won't be there, but it is what I think about this, though. Like the day that Washington went to the Big Ten, my first thought was, oh, they're going to get to keep Kalen DeBoer now.
Because they'll have the money, the finances to do it.
Well, even if they're not getting a full share, they'll make sure they compete with the other teams in the league. And if let's say the Pac-12 had stayed together, or if they'd been kind of lost with everybody else, then somebody from the Big Ten and the SEC would have swooped in and taken him. But now they can keep him. And I think that's a very promising thing for them, for football on the West Coast, because look, Washington is not like most West Coast teams. Their fan base is rabid. They care deeply about football. Like this is, and that's why Washington and Oregon are going to the Big Ten, to be perfectly honest. But I was very concerned that he was going to do a great job. And then somebody in the Big Ten who said, we played against you when you were at Indiana. We thought you drove us crazy. And then we saw what you did at Washington. They're just going to throw money at him and he'd be gone.
Yeah, like Indiana. I mean,
Yeah.
Tom Allen and the Hoosiers showed themselves serviceably today. And I'm sure we're going to talk about Ohio State. But I mean, Indiana's a team that absolutely could have come calling, as soon as next season, because while obviously Washington, as you just explained, is a much deeper and, prouder program.
There should be no universe where Indiana would be able to outbid Washington for its head coach. And that might have been possible if Washington weren't head of the Big Ten now, but that's not possible now. I'm glad you mentioned the Hoosiers, though, because Tom Allen, very good defensive mind, and I'd say they played pretty well defensively in a 23-3 loss to Ohio State. Now, we have a question in the chat right off the bat from Matt in Cleveland. Realistically, Ryan David said both McCord and Brown would play. Do we think he got scared and just figured, let's play consistent with McCord and leave with a W? I would say so, because he played Devin Brown one series in the first half, and then we didn't see him again until mop-up time.
And I think I would center those concerns around what a lot of us had circled about Ohio State before the season or coming into this season. Obviously, there was the question, who's going to play quarterback? But I think Ryan Day was going to figure that out. That was going to solve itself between McCord and Brown. The bigger concern was, could they replace these offensive tackles that went to the NFL? Well, the offensive line could not really, generate a lot of push up front for a running game that only averaged, I think, 4 yards a carry. And while the pass protection wasn't bad, it was just they were not able to scheme up big plays to Marvin Harrison and Mbuka and some of these guys. I think this was the first time they haven't had a passing touchdown, since the tornado they played in against Northwestern last season.
Yeah, it was a slog. It was not fun to watch. And look, Indiana, if they're good defensively, then we'll figure this out, because Ohio State will look better against future opponents, and Indiana will the defense will show it. It looked like Indiana was pretty fast on defense, and we can agree that Tom Allen knows what he's doing in terms of defense. So that part, I'm not completely worried about Ohio State yet, but it was, I don't know, it wasn't pretty. It was not smooth. They've got Youngstown State and Western Kentucky before they play against Notre Dame. Now, Western Kentucky is not going to be the easiest thing in the world, because they're probably going to score some points on you. So I want to see more from Ohio State. I was not particularly impressed right off the bat. I didn't expect Indiana to score much on them anyway, but that's the part, people say, well, how could you pick Penn State to win the Big Ten? Because I'm not sure Ohio State is what it has been. I think it might be Penn State's got to beat Michigan to win the Big Ten.
So you led me right where I was going to go, which is I did pick Ohio State to make it to the playoff and lose in the national championship game. But what I was thinking about for the majority of the fourth quarter, as they were just kind of, winding this game down, is what sort of opportunity does this present for Penn State later tonight? And you're going to, obviously the listeners will hear this and you're going to tease, talk about it after that game. But if they can make a statement against West Virginia and come out and say, hey, we are here. Deion's out here saying, I am him. Travis Hunter is him. Penn State has the same chance to do that as a team collectively tonight against a Power 5 opponent, Big 12. I know there's not a lot of expectations around West Virginia, but if you put a spanking on them, suddenly folks will believe that, hey, maybe it really is a 3-team race in the Big Ten East.
Yeah, I'm very excited to see what Penn State looks like. Michigan, I think they looked about how I thought they'd look. I was actually kind of impressed that they let JJ McCarthy throw it around a little bit more than they did early last season. And I would imagine that's probably calculated because you're gonna need to do that if you want to win another Big Ten title. So get him ready and let him throw and be prepared when you get to those games when you're really gonna need him. As far as some of these other games, let's talk about Wisconsin. Speaking of the Big Ten, the Dairy Raid, and we've been telling you all along that when Phil Longo has good backs and a decent offensive line, he's going to run the ball. They ran all over Buffalo. That was Chez Malusi and Braylon Allen. Let's see. I'm not great at math, but they combined for 298 yards on the ground on 30 carries. That's a pretty good average.
Yeah, I mean, Longo told me. I mean, I had a column with him at On3 earlier this summer, and he literally told me that, the one disagreement he ever had with Mike Leach was about how he does like to run the ball, and he would run the ball, and he did at Sam Houston State, and he certainly did at times in North Carolina. The problem, I think, for Wisconsin today, just getting some eyes on that game, there's still some kinks that's got to be worked out with Tanner Mordecai. The raw stats that he has at SMU were unbelievable. But when he kind of made that leap, when they would ever play, Power 5 competition, he would struggle. Obviously, this was not that. This was Buffalo, but a couple interceptions. The passing game just wasn't quite, in kink. But it's week one, so you kind of expect some of these little hiccups here and there.
Yeah, you're not going to average this much per carry against better teams. You're going to need Tanner Mordecai to bail you out sometimes. So he will have to do that. I was pleased to see this because this is what I thought they were going to be, and this is what they need to be. Personality wise, this is what they need to be. And I think Wisconsin will probably grow into this offense. We'll see how Mordecai does. But yeah, it did look like he was forcing it a little bit at times. I saw there were a few drops though as well. So they just got to get that cleaned up. Rice and Texas also no drama. Texas is tuned up for Alabama. They were a little bit sluggish at first, but then they just turned on the Jets, and I was pretty impressed.
I like what I saw from Quinn, and I love those weapons. I've been so high on JT at tight end, and then obviously AD Mitchell caught a touchdown. You have Xavier Worthy with a big game. You hit your over in your picks or prize picks over, what was it, 68 yards or whatever? I think more
than 67.5 yards on my prize picks square on Xavier Worthy, and I also had more than 310 more than 310.5 for Michael Penix. So I got those two cashed, and Worthy. But the JT Sanders touchdown, the catch and run, like that's what you want from him. And I know it's Rice, but this is what I keep saying about Texas. I need to see them do it when they're not, when they're not motivated by the opponent, when it's not Alabama or it's not Oklahoma. And they looked like they cared. They looked like they were ready. And that's all you can ask for in a game like that.
Yeah, the offensive line got off to a bit of a slow start and definitely picked it up in the second half. I think they ended the game allowing 8 tackles for loss. That's not going to cut it in Tuscaloosa, but I think you're going to get a sharper performance to your point, when they kind of play one of these bigger opponents here starting next weekend.
Yeah. So, by the way, we're not done with Deion yet, Jesse. He had a press conference after the game. We talked about that game as soon as it ended. But his press conference hadn't happened yet. Are you ready for some Deion post-game? Here's Deion post-game.
What we accomplished out there today, ain't none of y'all believe that. Maybe a couple of y'all that knew me and know how I get down. They know I'm a winner. We're going to end up winning. Ain't none of y'all thought you was going to be sitting up here. You supposed to be on the other side, interviewing that or coming asking me, well, what happened? You said this and you said that. Yeah? Now what? And now what? Everybody quiet now. Now what? Come here, dog. Yeah. It's one of our guys that does this podcast. I appreciate you, man. I appreciate you, dog. I'm straight up. I appreciate you, dog.
bless you, man.
Keep on doing what you do.
I will.
Thank you. That's one of our supporters when none of y'all was supporting us. He had our back. You believed, didn't you?
I did.
All right. What's up, boss? You believe now? Hold on. Oh, no. Do you believe now? Huh? Oh, no. I read through that bull junk you wrote down. I read through that. I sifted through all that. Yeah. Oh, no. Come on. Do you believe? You don't believe. You just answered it. You don't believe. Next question.
People are like, Deion shouldn't be chiding the reporters. They're not supposed to be true. He's having fun. Let the man have some fun. He just beat TCU. And in this particular case, he did have a lot of people say that this couldn't happen. This wasn't Kirby Smart convincing Georgia that people were saying they'd go 7-5. There were a lot of people who thought Deion would fall flat on his face today.
As I wrote at the end of my column about this game and On 3, if you were sick of the Deion Sanders infomercial before this game, before they played, now that he's 1-0, man, it is going to be prime time all the time, and he's going to tell you. He told you he was coming, and the dude delivered in spades in his first game as an FBS head coach.
So how about Travis Etienne, the Jacksonville Jaguars running back, former Clemson star, tweeting, "Lil bro needs to go play for Prime," talking about Trevor Etienne, who plays for Florida right now. Travis later said he was kidding, but here's a question that somebody asked me in the Dear Andy mailbag, and I think this is, if this works, if this one game isn't a flash in the pan, if the Deion thing is successful, and by successful, I mean they're winning. Even if they go a bowl game this year, that is very successful. Even if they miss a bowl game by a little bit, that's still successful compared to what they were. But let's say they win like 7, 8, 9 games. Like, will every coach in the country who takes over a program now try to completely flip the roster?
Yes. And I think the larger question is, will Deion Sanders still be at Colorado next season? I guess he probably will, because he probably.
I think he probably would.
He wants to coach Sanders. He wants to coach Shador and Travis, one more year. But man, if he wins 7 or 8 games, he will not be in Boulder long.
No, it's pretty amazing how much the profession is a bunch of copycats, and we've seen like Lincoln Riley flipped that USC roster pretty thoroughly. Hugh Freeze flipped the Auburn roster. Kenny Dillingham flipped the Arizona State roster, but nobody's flipped it as much as Deion flipped Colorado's roster. I do believe that if this works, every single new coach is going to try that.
You just said it, though. I would think about what we saw just a couple days ago. Kenny Dillingham, Arizona State, 55-ish new players on that roster. Jaden Rashada looked good at times. I think there's a lot of promise there, but that was a very sloppy win for them.
There was a 3-hour lightning delay in the middle.
The weather got terrible. I understand the weather got terrible, but that was an FCS opponent that did not come in with a lot of expectations, and you squeak out a 3-point win. Whereas again, Deion basically just says, we don't need spring practice. We're going to bring in all these new faces. I'm bringing my Louis too. Yeah, I mean, the luggage is the finest of quality for sure. I mean, just incredible game.
Speaking of first-year head coaches who came from somewhat non-traditional backgrounds, we got a little check on our favorite fashion icon, Charlotte coach Biff Poggi. Oh yeah, no sleeves on game day. They're playing South Carolina State. They are currently winning at halftime. We will talk more probably about the 49ers later tonight. Jesse, thank you so much for joining us. JD Fickell will join us to talk about the late games. We will be back right after the night games end. Keep it right here. Thanks so much for joining us.